So it's been made official. We have EC3 versus Moose at Bound for Glory coming up later this month. It's Impact Wrestling's biggest show of the year, isn't it? Bound for Glory is the WrestleMania, the Starcade of Impact Wrestling. I'm sure you're tired of hearing me saying that as much as I am, but it really is a massive show, and it's Impact's biggest show since Slammiversary earlier this year in July, which was, of course, just a massive, massive success. Now that we're a few months removed from that event, you can really start to look at it from a really reflective perspective and just see how successful it was. It was a massive, monumental shift for Impact Wrestling, that event of new talent coming in, old favourites returning, a new world champion that subsequently lost the title and dropped it to Eric Young. And one of those names that did return at Slammiversary was, of course, EC3. And it's funny that EC3 returned at Slammiversary to Impact Wrestling, of course, Impact Wrestling, where he really truly made his name. And since then, he still hasn't worked an official match for Impact Wrestling as of yet. It's very, very surprising because I think a lot of people, myself included, the videos are out there so you can go check them out, is that at the time, I truly did think that EC3 was going to come back to Impact Wrestling. He was going to become the world champion at Slammiversary. He was going to do this. He was going to do that. He was really going to be the spearhead, the ornament, the hood ornament, whatever you want to call him, the centerpiece, the cornerstone of Impact Wrestling as we move into the end of this year and into the next several years. I thought that was going to be the case with EC3, and it just hasn't been. He did return at the end of Slammiversary in a video package, and subsequently he's started this feud with Moose over the last few months, but he hasn't had a match in Impact Wrestling. He's appeared inside the Impact Zone a couple of times, that's about it, and all of his work has been pre-tapes, vignettes, all of that kind of stuff. So EC3 in Impact Wrestling the second time around has been very, very interesting. It really, really has. And now we have confirmation that he is going to have a match. He is going to have a match against Moose at Bound for Glory in an undisclosed location. So it's been months and months of mind games and psychological warfare, they're calling it, with Moose over that TNA World Heavyweight Championship that Moose now no longer has. The bout is gone. It doesn't exist anymore, even though some people say it never existed in the first place. But EC3 will finally step back. Well, I say he'll step back into the ring because it's an undisclosed location. So the whole point that they've told this storyline so far of EC3 returning to Impact Wrestling, the whole point with EC3, it's right, it's control your narrative. Free EC3, and that whole point of that character and that storyline was that in order to move forward from his career, he had to destroy his past. That's what EC3 kept saying. I have to destroy my past. And he did just that. And he stole the TNA World Heavyweight Championship from Moose. That was back at Impact Emergence. And then he had a funeral for it. He tossed it off a bridge. So the TNA World Heavyweight Championship doesn't exist anymore. It has no more existence. And I didn't have a massive problem with that's the way that they wrote the title off. Obviously, that title couldn't last forever. It just couldn't. It was a limited storyline. I still felt that potentially they could have done a brand split. And I know that's just very topical because the draft is going on in WWE right now, and brand splits historically, they've never really have worked in professional wrestling, whether it's in WWE or even WCW for that matter, because there was a tentative brand split with Thunder and Nitro and even WCW and the NWO, and it's never really worked. So why would it work in Impact? I don't know. I just felt that there was something they could do there. Impact is very successful on Access TV right now, and I felt that instead of 2 hours on Tuesday, you could have done 1 hour on Tuesday, 1 hour on Thursday, Impact's original time slot. You could have had Impact on Tuesday and TNA Wrestling on Thursday. I felt that there was something there for that. And given that you brought back the TNA World Heavyweight Championship with Moose, I felt that they could have done something with that. Obviously, that was not where they were going with it. That's fine. That was just an idea I came up with anyway, but I felt that it could have been interesting. And as I mentioned, the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, it was a limited storyline. It couldn't stay around forever. It was obviously always going to be dropped at some point. I just felt that there could have maybe been a better way than the whole throw it off a bridge. It was very Attitude Era, isn't it? We've seen it. I mean, how many times we saw it with the Intercontinental Championship, Steve Austin. We've seen it with WWE Championships, Edge throwing it in the Long Island Sound and all that kind of stuff. It just feels very Attitude Era. I guess that's what they were going for. I don't know. I felt that EC3 maybe could have done something, slightly a bit more creative with that. But again, don't have a massive problem with that. And I like the idea of EC3 being the one to remove the TNA World Heavyweight Championship from Impact Wrestling. One, because of course EC3 is a former TNA World Heavyweight Champion. He actually won that championship when he beat Kurt Angle for it. Not the white version, of course, but with the black leather. I mean, in fact, that championship that Moose was carrying around wasn't even the original TNA World Heavyweight Championship. They don't know where that is. The version that Moose had was actually a replica that was made, I believe, in Pakistan or something like that. So it wasn't even the original TNA World Heavyweight Championship. But the point being that it's very fitting that EC3 was the one to remove the TNA World Heavyweight Championship from the storyline. So didn't have a problem with that. I've liked the vignettes that they've done. I've liked the psychological warfare. Again, I was expecting that we would see more of EC3 in the build up to Bound for Glory, and I thought we would have at least seen a couple of matches on Impact Wrestling, whether it be Impact Emergence or whatever. I felt that we were going to see that, but of course we haven't, and that's just the way it is. I think this whole situation says a lot about EC3's current contract status with Impact Wrestling. And again, I don't know the complete details of this, but you have to put the pieces together throughout all of this. And when EC3 returned to Impact, he was very open and he said, I'm not staying here. I don't work here. I'm not signed here. And the way that he's had his appearances done on Impact Wrestling, that leads me to believe that that might actually be legitimate. Initially, I was very hesitant to say that, and I felt like, oh, that's just something they say. It's kind of an outsider angle, the kind of thing they're doing with Heath right now. And I was like, well, they're signed. They are signed. And I still do think that to a certain extent. There's no way that EC3 has been doing all of these Impact appearances and he's not under contract. I do think he did sign a contract, but now I do believe what he says by he's on a short-term deal. I do feel like he's on a short-term deal with a limited amount of dates and a specific amount of matches, maybe just even one. And that one match might be Bound for Glory. Perhaps when he signed with Impact Wrestling, re-signed with Impact Wrestling after departing WWE, he was indeed on a short-term deal, and it was only for one match, and that match is against Moose at Bound for Glory. That, to me, is what it kind of feels like right now, because EC3 isn't all in with Impact Wrestling right now. He isn't. And the evidence is there. As I mentioned, he hasn't had any matches with Impact. He's been limited to, in actuality, how many appearances inside the Impact Zone? 1, 2? So has he actually been at these tapings when they've been taking place? You could suspect no, because he can film these vignettes at home. He's got freedom in his deal to work with other companies. That's why he's working with Ring of Honor right now. He actually made his debut at the Ring of Honor tapings. I believe that was back in August, September, around that period of time. And actually his debut vignette did air, I believe it was last week on ROH TV. So that's going to be coming up in the near future. So EC3 is a very busy man, and his contract is very, very interesting. That whole status when it comes to his contract right now is very interesting. As far as we know, and as far as Scott D'Amore and anyone on these recent press pass calls has said, there isn't a working relationship between Impact Wrestling and Ring of Honor or anything like that. This situation when it comes to EC3 is that he's made his own deals, he's made short-term deals, and he's ensured in his contract that he's open to work with other companies. That's why he's able to work with Impact Wrestling. That's why he's able to work with Ring of Honor at the same time. And that pretty much does mean he is technically a free agent. If he's allowed to work for any company he chooses, he is a free agent. And that's why I think he's probably on a short-term deal. I think the really interesting thing about EC3 comes after Bound for Glory, because we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens when once this show is done. Is he going to continue appearing on Impact Wrestling? Is he going to continue this feud with Moose? Or is he just going to move to Ring of Honor and do stuff exclusively with Ring of Honor? I'd be very surprised if that was the case. I feel like Impact Wrestling, if you're not going to go to AEW, which I still do think is the end game destination for EC3, but if you're not going to go to AEW, and he certainly isn't going to go back to WWE or NXT, maybe he might do a couple of New Japan shots over there in the United States. But if you're not going to do any of that, you might as well stay with Impact Wrestling. That's the place to be right now. You've had multiple people say that they're really interested in working with Impact Wrestling. You had that interview that Heath did with Sports Illustrated a couple of weeks ago where he said I'm talking to people in WWE, people that are under contract. They're under contract for about a year longer, and they're like, I want to go to Impact Wrestling. I want to see what it's like at Impact Wrestling because it does have a great reputation right now. It really does. And that's really important. Not only is the success in terms of the TV audience, in terms of streaming, in terms of their pay-per-views, of course that is very important, but Impact Wrestling's reputation in the business right now is the best it's been in a very long time. So if I'm EC3 and I'm weighing up the options, if I'm not going to go to AEW, I'd probably want to commit more to Impact Wrestling. Again, I don't know what the situation is with his contract. We'll probably find out after Bound for Glory. Then we'll find out a lot more, I think, about EC3 after Bound for Glory, about his status with Impact Wrestling. But it's a very interesting time for him. I'm just glad to see him back in action eventually at Bound for Glory against Moose. Maybe it's a case of when he returned at Slammiversary, he said, you know what, I want to do this right. I want to do this proper. I don't want to have my first match until the biggest show of the year, that being Bound for Glory. Once that's said and done, then we can start using me on week-to-week Impact Wrestling. I can have matches on the show, that kind of deal. So there's lots of different ways to look at this, many different ways to look at this. As I mentioned, given that EC3 is allowed to work for Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling at the same time, and it appears that he has short-term deals with both organizations, I still do think that he will eventually end up in AEW, purely because he's a big name, he's a big star, and he's smart. He's very smart. He knows that him going straight from WWE to AEW probably isn't the right call because lots of people are going to do that. And that AEW roster is very stacked, it's very loaded. And if you come over at the same time as everyone else, are you going to make a big impact? No, you're not. So EC3 knows, you know what, there was a lot of damage done to my reputation in WWE. Maybe I need to have a run with Ring of Honor. Maybe I need to have a run with Impact Wrestling. I need to make myself desirable again in terms of the audience being refreshed to who I am. I need to get a bit of buzz about my name again. And I think that's what he's attempting to do here in these runs in Impact Wrestling and Ring of Honor. Now, obviously, as they mentioned, the match between EC3 and Moose is being said to be at an undisclosed location. Now, an undisclosed location feels very similar to the Tommaso Ciampa versus Johnny Gargano match we saw on NXT earlier this year, in that it was it like a warehouse or something like that? Maybe it'll be a similar kind of thing. EC3 does all of his promos, the Control Your Narrative promos, from the same place. In actuality, when EC3, his non-compete clause with WWE expired, he did that video where he technically had his first post-WWE match, and it was kind of inside of a warehouse, wasn't it? And it was a very well shot and produced piece and very well done, very cinematic. I wonder if the EC3 versus Moose match will be in that very same warehouse. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how they did it. And the whole concept of the undisclosed location says to me that potentially this match will be shot in a cinematic style. Now, usually I would be slightly hesitant with that, but this is 2020 after all. They've confirmed, they being Impact Wrestling, that we aren't going to have fans back at Bound for Glory. That isn't a plan that's up for negotiation as to yet. Like any professional wrestling promotion, they might eventually get back to having fans at their TV tapings or at their pay-per-views, but it isn't going to start at Bound for Glory, so don't expect to see live fans in attendance at Bound for Glory. So given that that's the case, I think that it's not a bad thing that EC3 versus Moose is likely to be cinematic, because look, the match will be fine, and the matches that take place at the Impact Zone and have no fans in attendance, those matches will be fine, and I'm sure they'll do an excellent job. It hasn't hurt the Impact Wrestling television product, and it hasn't hurt Slammiversary or Impact Emergence or anything like that when it's happened, but I think it does take away somewhat from the matches. It obviously will do. Look at any professional wrestling program that hasn't had fans in 2020. It has hurt the product. So I'm not totally against having this cinematic match between EC3 and Moose, given the nature of this storyline, given that it has been very psychological, given that it has been very promo heavy, especially from EC3 and playing all of these mind games and all this kind of stuff. I think if you add in that cinematic element, we can do some really crazy and wacky stuff here. And EC3, ever since being released by WWE, has been the master of getting hype and getting attention, getting people buzzing via his vignettes on social media, and they've been really well produced, really well put together. He's a very, very, very creative man and a very creative wrestler. So I think if you give EC3 and Moose the opportunity to have a match in this cinematic setting. I think they could do something really, really interesting here. I think they could do something really interesting, really different, and it could tell a great story. It could tell a fantastic story. And also, I mentioned about EC3 not really having any matches of Impact yet. This still does leave the opportunity for a future match for EC3 in the Impact Zone, and even that feels like a big deal. So you have EC3 having his first match back with Impact Wrestling, but you also save and put in your back pocket that match of EC3 in the Impact Zone later on. So the cards are all there. The cards are all there, and there's a lot left to do, I feel, for EC3 back in Impact Wrestling. I would like to see EC3 challenge the world-class maniac Eric Young. I think that would be really interesting. Two former Impact guys that have returned to the company face off for the World Championship. There's a ton of guys I would like to see EC3 face in Impact Wrestling right now. I mean, a ton. I'd love to see him face off against Eddie Edwards, Ace Austin. I think that could be a lot of fun. So it'll be interesting. As I said, I think the real update about EC3's future of Impact will come after Bound for Glory. As I mentioned, I think this match will be cinematic. Usually I'll be against that, but I think given the environment that we're in and the climate that we're in right now, I think this could be really interesting and a lot of fun. But we don't have an update yet on the undisclosed location. Could you imagine how crazy people would go if the undisclosed location was Ring of Honor's arena? I'm just throwing it out there. Who knows? You never know. You never know. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on EC3 versus Moose being confirmed for Bound for Glory in an undisclosed location? Is this going to be cinematic? Is it not going to be cinematic? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Your predictions, your thoughts on this undisclosed location match at Bound for Glory between EC3 and Moose. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button as well. Easy for me to say. Smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.